Hey friends, it's Sarah. In my last video, I talked about the worst and most disappointing books I read in 2024, as well as books that I didn't end up finishing. But in this video, I want to talk about my favorite books that I read last year. So in previous years, I've done a book bracket sort of thing, like March Madness style, narrowed them down one book each month till I find the book of the year. But then I found that that would exclude some books that were excellent in favor of ones that were just like good, because the excellent ones were grouped together in the same month. So I've scrapped that and I've gone rogue this year, and I've just pulled out all the best books that I read that I wanted to talk about. Which ended up being a lot. Previous years have had like 12 books narrowed down to like the best book of the year. This year I have 25 books and book series that I want to talk about. So to make this a little bit easier on myself, I've sorted them into different categories. So let's just get into it. The first category I have is new favorite series. Alright, so first up we have the Renegades series by Marissa Meyer. This one is a 4.5-star series. The way that I've rated the series is I've kind of taken a sort of average from how I rated each book in this series, but Renegades gets 4.5 stars. This is a series by the author of the Lunar Chronicles, which I absolutely adore. This is a teen series that follows two prodigies. They're basically like superheroes, they have superpowers. And the old way of life in the society has crumbled, and so this group of superheroes called the Renegades are remaking society, bringing order back into everyone's lives. And the main character, Nova, has a vendetta against the group of superheroes and is trying to infiltrate them to take them down from the inside. It's got a really interesting, morally gray main character. The superhero aspects were also really interesting, like all the different powers and everything. And there's a lot of great social commentary about like what makes a society, who should make decisions, and what happens when one group of people gets in power and starts going a little off book. The next series is The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. This is another 4.5-star series. So far there's only 2 books set in this world, and I wouldn't say that they're like directly sequels. One is set several years after the other and focuses on like a different main character, but it's all in the same world, and there's like cameos from the previous book. But this is an adult sci-fi series that is part like sci-fi and part post-apocalyptic kind of story. Basically, the multiverse has been discovered, and specially trained traversers can pass into other universes where their double has already died. So our main character, Kara, has died on 372 different worlds, and so she's like the perfect candidate for traversing. But then one of her 8 remaining doubles dies mysteriously, and that kind of reveals a secret that's going to shake the foundation of society as she knows it. It's got a bit of a sapphic romance in it. It's got these like really crazy Mad Max vibes that I was not expecting, and lots of really interesting commentary, again, on like society, identity, privilege, and like class separation. So really interesting, really good, pretty like gritty, which I wasn't expecting. I thought it was just gonna be like pure sci-fi multiverse stuff, but there's a lot of like in the desert, riding motorcycles, fighting people, which was really fun. Then another teen series, The Merciful Crow by Margaret Owen. 5 stars across the board. It's a duology set in a world that's suffering from this big plague, and the main character, Fi, is a crow who are like a group of people who are undertakers and mercy killers. So they get like summoned by towns to deal with plague victims, whether that's taking the bodies away or putting them out of their misery. And then they get a call to like the castle where the king lives and everything, and the crows find that the crown prince has faked his death in order to escape the power-hungry queen. So Fi and her band agree to escort him and his bodyguard to where he's trying to get to, in return for him raising the crow's status in like the class hierarchy when he does eventually take the throne. It's kind of dark. There's like a little bit of body horror. There's like some like tooth stuff, so if you're sensitive to that, fair warning. But then there's also really interesting examinations, again, of like class systems, and it's a super fast-paced adventure, like a little hint of romance in there, and a little hint of romance in there too. I really love this. I loved Margaret Owen's Little Thieves series, and so I was absolutely thrilled to also love this one, and I think I'm just gonna read whatever Margaret Owen writes from now on because So far, all of her books that I've read have just been chef's kiss. And then we have the Ambit's Run series by Sagas. This one is, I think, a 4-star series for me. Again, sci-fi, and it follows like a ramshackle crew who are slowly uncovering corruption at the heart of the governmental systems that rule the galaxy. There's only 2 books in the series so far, but I really hope there's more. Like, there is a through line through both of these books, but it is a little bit more of kind of like a, not quite episodic, but I do think it could be episodic. Maybe that's how I'll say it. I do think there could just be another book where they're just kind of like doing fun things and like hanging out on their ship, which I would love. I will admit that some of the world building is like a little bit shaky at times, and I kept getting confused about the different like government arms. I couldn't keep track of which one was which, but I really love the characters so much in this, and so I just didn't care about the world building. There's like an AI captain who is slowly becoming a bit more human. There's like this tough enforcer. There's this like really cool mechanic doctor, and an unexpected like soldier who shows up from the enforcer's past, and a really cute shipboard cat. Is great. For me, it falls into the same kind of category as like A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, or like the Firefly TV show. This outcasts in a spaceship just trying their best, and I think that's one of my favorite sci-fi genres. So those are all the series that I really love this year. And now we're going to talk about a couple of authors that I think have been elevated to favorite author status. I feel like Margaret Owen falls into this for me, again, having read the Merciful Crow series. But other than her, we have Andrew Joseph White. I read both The Spirit Bears the Teeth and Compound Fracture by Andrew Joseph White this year, and I gave both of them 5 stars. I also read Hell Falls With Us last year, I believe, and I think it was like a 4-star read, but these 2, 5 stars, so good. And despite them being like body horror teen books and me being a big ol' baby, I really love Andrew's books. They explore the experience of being trans, the oppression of gender roles, the characters are always like flawed and relatable, the stakes are always real high, and the overall message, despite all of everything I've said, are always really hopeful. He's got a debut adult book coming out later this year, and I'm a little bit scared to read it. I think it's going to be too intense for me, but I'm going to give it a try, and then I'll read whatever teen book he puts out for sure. And then we have Mary Roach. I read Stiff as well as Packing for Mars by this author, and I was just absolutely enchanted by her really comedic kind of pop science books. She asks really interesting questions, she uncovers parts of her subjects that are not as often discussed, and she just does it all with such a quick wit. I really love Stiff especially. I talked about it in my like nonfiction video last November, so if you want to hear more about it, it's in that video. And I really want to read more of her books. I think she has a really interesting way of finding questions that you would never think to ask yourself, but that are absolutely fascinating to read about. So last year I also read some really excellent graphic novels that I wanted to talk about. So first up we have The Deep Dark by Molly Knox Ostertag. 5 stars, 6 stars, this was incredible. It's a teen graphic novel that had me literally crying. And it's a story about 2 girls who were friends as kids and have reunited in their late teens. One of them's trans, the other one is kind of hiding this dark family secret. It deals with like family responsibility, tradition, identity, and how to let yourself be cared for when you're the one who's often the caretaker. I loved it so much, and I actually gifted it this Christmas. The art is beautiful in it, and it's also got like a touch of, I wouldn't say exactly magical realism, but like there's a hint of the supernatural in it. It's excellent. I need to buy a copy for myself. I don't know why I haven't yet, but I need to own this book. It's amazing. Another graphic novel that I loved was Himawari House by Harmony Becker. I again talked about this in one of my previous videos, I think in my September wrap-up video, but it follows these 3 foreign exchange students in Japan. They're learning the language and the culture together. Our main character is Japanese but is from the States, so she's kind of getting in touch with her identity and she's feeling estranged from that part of her. And the art, again, is like really beautiful, and there's just some incredibly deep and meaningful relationships in here. Picked it up kind of on a whim, but I'm so glad I did, and it's just lovely. Then we have Heartstopper Volume 5 by Alice Oseman, 5 stars again. I love the Heartstopper series so much. They have a special little place in my heart, and they are just a little warm comfort in my soul. But this installment dealt with some more serious topics. around mental health and stuff like that, but it was still infused with so much love and care. And like, a shout out to the Heartstopper TV series for doing such a great job. It gives me the same feelings. Season 2 made me like cry, watched it with a friend, and we were sitting there crying together, and it was great. It was such a good series. So I'm excited for season 3, I hope. Then I read some excellent nonfiction books last year as well. The first of which is Bad Blood by John Carreyrou. This book lives in my head rent-free. It's a nonfiction book about Elizabeth Holmes and the Theranos scandal. So basically Elizabeth Holmes started a company called Theranos, which purported to make devices that she said would be able to take a pinprick of blood and run every possible blood test on it. That was not true. And the book reveals how she was able to get insane amounts of funding and pull the wool over the eyes of a lot of rich and powerful people. It was so infuriating, and again, I talked about it in my nonfiction video, but 5-star read, absolutely insane. I listened to the audiobook of it, and then as you can see, I've gotten the physical book out of the library because I want to reread it because I was just like, ah! And I think about it all the time, and I'm a little insufferable about it. Getting more into my specific niche interests, we have the Shakespeare and Company Book of Interviews edited by Adam Biles. This is from the Iconic Bookshop in Paris, and they have interviews with authors, and then they like record them, and they've compiled them into a book, or some of their favorite ones. I really enjoyed all the interviews, even if I didn't know the author or the book, and I think there was a lot of really interesting ideas discussed. It made me think a lot. And so it's just really nice to like see behind the scenes of books that I had never read before. And maybe there's some that I want to read now. I'm also just like a little bit obsessed with Shakespeare and Company. It's my #1 bucket list item. So anything from there, chef's kiss, 5 stars. Up next we have Endurance by Alfred Lansing. This is the true story of Ernest Shackleton's 1914 attempt to reach the South Pole on foot. Their ship, the Endurance, got crushed between 2 ice floes, and the crew of 28 men had to traverse 850 miles to get to the closest bit of civilization. It was absolutely harrowing and so gripping. This was, again, in my nonfiction video because it was excellent. It was 5 stars, and just like, oh my god, how do people go through this sort of stuff? Insane. This section is like almost just a recap of my nonfiction favorites video, because here's another book that was in that, The Radium Girls by Kate Moore. This is a book that talks about the women who worked in watch face painting factories. They were painting the dials with glow-in-the-dark radium paint during the First World War and beyond, and explores how that led to a bunch of them developing radium poisoning and experiencing some really horrendous side effects. If you could classify a nonfiction book as body horror, that would do it. This would be it. Another one that made me just so mad and pretty grossed out, to be honest. 5 stars again, but like, oh, those poor women. Then we have An Absolute Casserole by Alex Horne and Jack Bernhardt. This is on the lighter side. This is one for the hardcore Taskmaster fans. I gave it 5 stars because I have been obsessed with Taskmaster the past couple years. It's a compendium of various Taskmaster facts and stats, everything from like highest scoring contestant of all time to number of times a rubber ducks have featured in tasks. It was great. Like I said, I'm a huge Taskmaster nerd, so it was perfect for me. I bought it for myself as my own little present. It's signed by little Alex Horne, which brings me so much joy, and it came all the way from the UK. I probably spent too much money on it, but that's okay. It's great, it's lovely, it's very fun. All right, moving away from books that are going to make you upset to the romance genre, I want to talk about some of my favorite romances I read this year. First up was You Again by Kate Goldbeck. This is like a modern kind of like gender-bent version of When Harry Met Sally, and I never really enjoyed that movie all that much. Please don't come for me. And maybe I need to just like rewatch it. Maybe I was not at the right stage of life to watch it, but regardless, I really loved this book. It's relatively explicit. Not that there's like a ton of sex scenes, there are a few, but more that there's like a lot of discussion around sex and like being sex positive, so there's a lot of kind of openness about that topic. But it follows 2 kind of terrible people who keep running into each other again and again at different points over, I think, about 10 years until they're finally in a place where they can be friends and maybe more. It's funny, it's sweet, it's sarcastic, it's angsty. It was originally a Raylo fanfic, but I'm trying not to think about that, and then it's okay. 5 stars. I just thought the banter was really good. The chemistry was excellent. Like I said, they're both kind of awful, but it worked because they were awful together, and that was fun. Then we have, of course, Funny Story by Emily Henry. It's Emily Henry. I love everything she writes, including the newsletter that is called Emily's Grocery List. But this book in particular follows two people whose exes got engaged, and they've become roommates and are dealing with the fallout of these unexpected breakups when they decide to be each other's fake dates to their ex's wedding. It's got all the hallmarks of an Emily Henry book: great banter, it's got a fun twist on a romance trope, and just absolutely lovable and charming characters. 5 stars. It's got all the tabs. We love it. Then we have This Summer Will Be Different by Carly Fortune. This is a split timeline romance where the main character, while on vacation, accidentally has a one-night stand with her best friend's brother. Ooh, scandal. And now, years later, she's chasing down said best friend back to Prince Edward Island a week before the friend's wedding. And the brother is also there, so they have to try and keep their chemistry at bay because she's there to support her friend and figure out what on earth is going on. But it was a great vacation romance. There's this electric chemistry, and there was a third act conflict that actually worked for me. 4.5 stars. I was really happy with this because I love Carly Fortune's first book, did not like her second book, but this one was a redemption and I think is my favorite of hers, so excellent. And then we have The Prospects by K.T. Hoffman. Another 4.5 stars. This is an adult romance that follows a trans man on a minor league baseball team. His former teammate and now rival gets traded to his team, and magic on and off the field blossoms. I really liked how this book balanced the sports aspect with the rest of the plot. It reminded me a little bit of Check Please, which is my all-time favorite graphic novel series or sports romance. Just like a lot of things. The romance in this is very sweet, the sports stakes are high, and then the discussions around mental health are handled excellently. This section, I wasn't quite sure what to call. We're gonna say it's speculative fiction. It's like all sorts of weird, not quite fantasy, not quite sci-fi, something's up, something's weird. But to start us off, we have You Feel It Just Below the Ribs by Jeffrey Cranor and Janina Mathewson. 4-star book. This is a fictional autobiography in an alternate world that follows a woman who, after this giant war, isolates herself from familial relationships. She works as a researcher for this new society to help others achieve this kind of detachment and ensure that tribal loyalties never sow divisions that will lead to another war. This also serves kind of as a backstory for at least the first season of the Within the Wires podcast, but you don't have to listen to that to enjoy this, or vice versa. I love the exploration of truth, memory, loyalty, and governmental influence. It also had footnotes from the publisher refuting various aspects of the narrative, which I found to be quite interesting, and it really made you question who you were going to trust. Do you trust this institution of the new society who's saying she's lying? Do you trust the narrator who is potentially unveiling truths that the government would not be comfortable with people knowing? I don't know. I really love everything that the creators of Welcome to Night Vale, Jeffrey Cranor is one of them. I love everything they make. I think they're really interesting brains, and they always have very weird books that they write. It was great. The next weird book, maybe this should just be the weird book category, but the next weird book we have is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This was 5 stars. This was incredible. It's about a woman who lives in a cage with 39 other women, and they're all being watched over by guards. And unlike the rest of the women, she actually grew up mostly in the cage. She doesn't have memories of life before her imprisonment, and this difference is actually going to be what might help them escape. It's an absolutely devastating story set in a post-apocalyptic world about hope and friendship and the unceasing reach towards humanity. It was amazing. I think is originally written in French, translated, and I think it was written in the 80s or 90s maybe, but has kind of recently come back into print and is just incredible. I think it definitely would be a modern classic. Then we have The 6 Deaths of the Saint by Alex E. Harrow. 5 more stars. This is a short story at only 31 pages long about a servant girl whose life is spared by the Saint of War and ends up being used as a weapon for the prince of this realm. She's doomed to spend all of her time fighting battles that increase the prince's status while she's just out there on the battlefield. And this made me so emotional considering it was only 31 pages. I will read again everything Alex E. Harrow writes. She's one of my favorite authors, and she has, I think, a short story as well as a novel coming out in 2025, which I am so pumped for. If you saw Chapel Roan's performance at, I think it was the VMAs, where she's in that knight armor, Alex E. Harrow was this is the vibe of my next novel, and I am here for it. I am seated. I cannot wait. Then we have Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. 5 more stars. We're just hitting it out of the park here. But this is about Piranesi, who lives in a seemingly endless house that is full of statues, the ocean, and some like animals. He spends all of his time mapping out the labyrinth of this house, except for the twice-a-week visits from the other, who is the only other person in the house. And together they are researching a great and secret knowledge. In his travels, Piranesi starts to find evidence of a third person in the house, and his whole world kind of starts to unravel. It's atmospheric, it's literary, and it really like sticks in your brain for ages after you read it. It's so weird, it's so beautiful, and it feels kind of like living in a dream. It's great. I recommend it to a coworker who also loved it, and it deserves all the hype it gets. I have separated these two as kind of my top 2 books of the year. While all these other ones were excellent, and I do think about them a lot, these 2 are ones that when people ask me like, what was your best book of the year? These are the 2 that like come to top of mind. First up, we have I Hope This Finds You Well by Natalie Sue, another 5-star read. And this is actually written by a local Calgarian author, which was so exciting for me. But it's an adult fiction novel that follows a woman who has been writing snide remarks in white text at the bottom of her emails, and her rude messages are discovered. And so as a punishment, she's forced to do some HR training, of course, but all of her work missives are also going to be monitored. And then there's a tech mix-up, so she accidentally gains access to all of her coworkers' emails and DMs, and using this insider knowledge, she starts to be able to kind of manipulate her coworkers a bit to make her work more bearable. But then as she gains access to their inner lives, she starts to see them more sympathetically. And this is like kind of funny, but it's mostly heartwarming. Like, it's really marketed as like, it's funny, it's sarcastic, but I found it very like affirming of humanity and like heartwarming. And overall, it's a story about seeing other people more complexly and like the benefit of community. And I just thought that was really beautiful. I think this one also made me cry. If it didn't make me cry, it definitely like brought me to the point of tears. And then finally, the last book that I want to talk about, my second top book of the year, is The Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley. Even though it's like one of the top books of the year, I only give it a 4-star rating, maybe 4.5 stars, but this is like a super weird genre mixing book. It's part sci-fi, part like slice of life, part romance, part bureaucratic thriller, but it's set in this world where the British government has discovered a time travel machine and wants to know how that will affect a person before they send anyone through the time travel machine. They devise this whole ministry to pull people from time at the moment they're about to die and then study what being out of time does to them. So our main character is an employee at this ministry and is tasked with watching over one of the people, who is like a polar explorer, who has been pulled out of time to see what happens to him. So the book follows her and her ward, as well as the other people who've been pulled out of different periods of history. There's discussions around identity, governmental overreach, and the intricacies of cultural acclamation. I think the end was like a little bit disorganized, which is why it wasn't a 5-star read for me, but I love the characters so much that I was able to overlook that pretty well. And it made me think a lot. It was one of those books that, again, I recommend to a coworker who also loved it, and we're able to have really interesting discussions about it. I think there's parts of it where I was like, oh, you could expand more on this. But because she didn't expand more on this, it kind of gives the reader a space to like think about that and to kind of like pull stuff out of the text. I think this one would be a really interesting, again, like a book club book. I think this would work really well as a book club book. And I think it would also be interesting to study in like a school setting and to be able to like pull things out of it. Again, I don't know why I don't have copies of these 2 books. It's because I'm trying to not spend more money. I do think I will end up purchasing them because they were so interesting and I think about them all the time. So those are the two top books of the year. And those were all of the 25 books / series that I really, really loved in 2024. I had such a good reading year. I had so many like iconic books that I think about all the time. It was excellent. It's really set the bar super high for 2025. So hopefully 2025 is another excellent reading year. If not, at least I have all my 2024 books I can look back on. But thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time. Now go read a book. The Crown Prince has faked his death in order to escape the like power-hungry queen. Another foy. This is a series by the author of the Lunacar. This is a series by the author of the Lunacar. Oh my god, I can't say that.